Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's video lecture, and we continue covering the cardiovascular system, the heart. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first part of this PowerPoint was covered in my first video on the cardiovascular system. Okay, so let's start with this diagram just to review internal structure of the heart. I'm gonna pick up my pen. All right, so we know that heart is made of 4 chambers. So we have 2 upper chambers, this one and that. So this is called atria. So we have right atrium and left atrium. And from atria, blood flow to ventricles. So we have right ventricle and a left ventricle. Now you can see that between ventricles, we have valves. We call them AV valve because, you know, A stands for atria, right? And V stands for ventricle. So it's a right AV valve, left AV valve. Another name for right AV valve is tricuspid valve. For left is bicuspid or mitral. Function of valve to prevent backflow of blood. All right, so when ventricles contract, so you see this muscle over here, right? That's a myocardium. So when ventricles contract, blood gonna flow to different directions, right? So it's gonna flow this way and this way. But our goal is to pump blood inside these blood vessels, pulmonary trunk, and over here, aorta. So we don't want blood to flow back to atria, right? That's why when ventricles contract, this valve shuts down and we prevent backflow of blood to atria. Now, if you notice over here, on walls of the heart, you have muscles, papillary muscles, and those valves are attached to papillary muscles through this chordae tendinate. And the same with bicuspid valve. And this is to prevent those valves from prolapsing back inside atria. So imagine that, you know, we wouldn't have these cords. Then when ventricle contract, this valve would prolapse back inside the atria, and this would not prevent backflow of blood, right? So that's kind of a quick review. And so here we talk again about atria and ventricles. So right atrium receives blood from systemic circulation. That means it receives deoxygenated blood. It has pectinate muscles and tricuspid valve between right atrium and right ventricle. Right ventricle has chordae tendineae, right? So that's those cord-like structure that keep valve attached to papillary muscles. So here we have papillary muscles. Trabecular carni, these muscles of the walls of ventricles. It has a moderator band, only found in animals. Human heart does not have moderator band, and pumps blood to pulmonary trunk. Pulmonary trunk will take your blood to pulmonary arteries and then to the lungs. Left atrium receives blood from pulmonary circuit, so from lungs. That means blood will be oxygenated. And then atria contracts, and you know, most of the blood, what it says here, 20% of filling, that means that most of the blood from atria flow to ventricles passively. We don't need really contraction. So it just flow on its own, and the last 20% of volume is pumped by atrial contraction to the ventricles. So left ventricle have a thick muscle layer. So if you look at this heart over here, now this area right there, right? Oops. This is the right ventricle, and this is a left ventricle. So you can see at thickness of wall over here and over there. So obviously you can see that left ventricle has much thicker muscular layer. And this is because left ventricle pumps blood to your body systems. It pumps blood to your entire body when right ventricle pumps blood to your lungs. It has this trabecular cornea that we already mentioned and pumps blood to systemic circuit. And here's our valves. So we have right AV valve or tricuspid valve between right atrium and right ventricle, right? So that would be this one. And tricuspid means it has like these three flaps. Those flaps we call cusps. Then let's look at mitral valve first. Is bicuspid valve right here. So it has these two parts. And it's between left atrium and ventricle. So both this one and this one are AV valves. And then we have a semilunar valve, also two semilunar valve. One is pulmonary valve, and this is shown right here. And this one is between right ventricle and pulmonary trunk. And aortic valve or aortic semilunar valve, it between, okay, that's, I'm sorry, this is the arrow over here. It's between left ventricle. I wonder if I can, hold on, let me change it because that's not correct. Between left ventricle and aorta. Yeah, let's see. So aortic valve between left ventricle and aorta. Okay, so let's, and by the way, this is the aortic valve. Now aortic valves, they don't have those chordae tendonae. Only AV valve have chordae tendonae that attach them to papillary muscles. So yeah, so on this diagram, it says that when blood flow through the heart, AV valve open, then semilunar valves closed, and when semilunar valve open, then AV valve close. Right, so that's the blood flow. And in the physiology part, you will also learn that at some point of time, both valves can be closed. But we will leave it for physiology lecture. Right, so here, oh, by the way, yeah, it's, what I kind of missed over here, when blood flow from atria to ventricles, right? When blood flow from atria to ventricles, we must open AV valve, right? Otherwise, how blood will flow from atria to ventricle if we have like block between them, the valve, right? So we want AV valve open and then semilunar valve are closed at that point. And when we have blood flow from ventricle to great vessels, and we have valve between ventricle and great vessels too. Those are our semilunar valves. So we need to open semilunar valves and then AV valve valves are closed. Now your heart pumps oxygenated blood to your entire body, including heart itself. And actually, your heart takes care of its own muscle and tissue, other tissues first. So if you see, this is our aorta, right? And the first two branches from aorta, this one and this. So those are the very first branches from aorta, are coronary arteries. Now, coronary arteries supply blood to the heart muscle itself. We do have epicardial coronary arteries. So they on a kind of on the surface of the heart, that's what it says. So let's look what arteries we need to know. Well, first we need to know this right coronary arteries that will go all the way, around the heart in this sulcus that is called coronary sulcus. And the left coronary artery is a shorter blood vessel. So right there. So that's the left coronary artery. And then it branches into two. All right. It's called circumflex artery, and it also goes around. It has anastomosis with right coronary arteries. So it has a right coronary. This is the behind, right? So if this line that I'm drawing, it's actually on the posterior side of the heart. So right coronary artery, and then it goes on the posterior side, and left coronary artery and its branch, circumflex artery, again goes to the back and makes connection with the right coronary artery. And another branch from left coronary artery is this one, and it's called anterior interventricular artery. And on the posterior side, we will have posterior interventricular artery, right? So those kind of like just the major blood vessels, but you can see we have many of these, like this one is called right marginal artery. And of course, we will have left marginal artery as well, right? But those are the blood vessels of the coronary circulation that brings oxygen to heart itself. Right, so here's our circumflex artery, anterior interventricular artery, marginal arteries, posterior interventricular arteries. Okay, now if you bring oxygenated blood to the heart, you need to drain deoxygenated blood back from the surface of the heart back to the right atrium. And this is the job of coronary veins. Right, so let's look over here. So this is anterior view of the heart, and we have great cardiac vein, we have small cardiac vein, and some anterior cardiac veins on the anterior side of the heart. And then we will have on the back side, we will have this middle cardiac vein. And those cardiac veins bring blood to the posterior side of the heart called coronary sinus. So that's a blood vessel, pretty large in diameter compared with just regular veins. And this coronary sinus receives blood from great cardiac vein, small cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, and then it's delivered blood to the right atrium, right? Like any deoxygenated blood from systemic circulation. So great cardiac vein, posterior cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, small cardiac vein, anterior cardiac vein. So again, those are anterior cardiac vein, great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, small cardiac vein, and I don't know, posterior cardiac veins, not shown over here. And what it's not listed is coronary sinus, this blood vessel here. Now, sometimes we might have what is called coronary blockage, when coronary artery is blocked, and it's because of the buildup of a plug, so there is some plug or some clot within those coronary vessels, and this will cause myocardial infarction or heart attack. So you can see this is a blockage of left coronary artery, right? So you can see there's almost no flow in this area. And this is the blockage or circumflex flex artery. And if we have blockage, then we reduce blood flow, right? Or we completely cut off blood flow. If you don't have blood flow to myocardium of the heart, those cells start dying, and that's what we call myocardial infarction. Let's very quickly look at the cardiac muscles. We know that heart is made of cardiac muscle cells, but we have actually two types of cells. So it says right here, two cell types. Myocardial contractile cells, that are this one. That's a majority of the cells. So most of the cells, more than 90%, are these contractile cells. So those are regular cells that we looked before, right? They are branching cells, like look, this one is really nice. So here's one branching cell. It has intercalated disc, it's uninucleated, it has striation, however, are not shown on this picture. And those cells, they receive electrical impulse. This yellow lines show us electrical current, and they send this electrical current from cell to cell through these intercalated discs. And we know that we have ion channels or gap junction between those cells. Gap junction would be the right word to use. And then the cells will contract. And when those cells contract, your heart contract and pump your blood. But we have another type of cells. It's called myocardial conducting cells, like shown right there. Those cells will not contract, but they will generate this electrical impulse. And orthorhythmicity means that some cells of the heart can initiate electrical potential without innervation from the nervous system. So those are orthorhythmic cells. And we already mentioned intercalated disc, but another important information is that those discs synchronize contraction of muscle cells as a one unit. So if you remember neurons, right? So if you have neurons and you have axon, and then you have another cell, you actually have a gap, and neuron need to release neurotransmitter. So here we have electrical synapse. So we conduct these impulses way faster. And intercalated disc bind adjacent sarcolemas, and sarcolemma is the cell membrane of muscle cells. Okay, so let's look at this conduction system. So let's look at these cells over here, conducting cells, and those cells make conduction system of the heart. Now, what is electrical potential? Electrical potential is really like electrical impulse. And in this conducting system or conduction system, each cell of the conduction system can generate electrical impulse, but some generate them faster, and the fastest cell sets a contraction rate. And the fastest to generate electrical impulse is actually this SA node. And we call normal contraction rate SA rhythm, right? So a sinoatrial or SA rhythm. This is our pacemaker, and this will generate the rate of contraction. So let's see what all these cells and bundles are called. So we have a group of cells in the walls of a right atrium, and we call it SA node or pacemaker. SA means sinoatrial node. Now here we generate the electrical impulse, and electrical impulse moves towards the AV node. So this is AV node, so it's atrioventricular node. And also the impulse moves all towards the left atrium and through all the cells of the atria, and atrium contracts, right? After we have this electrical impulse moves through the cells, they will contract. But we need electricity to be spread also to the ventricle. So that's why electrical impulse from AV node, it reaches, SA node reaches AV node. And this is where we have some pause of impulses, some delay, and this delay allow for atria to contract. Now this is called AV node. This is called AV bundle. So AV node, atrioventricular node. This is atrioventricular bundle, AV bundle. It was used, they used to call it bundle of His. And then we have bundle branches. So that's a bundle branches, left and right. And then we have Purkinje fibers. So AV bundle connects atria to the ventricles. Bundle branches conduct impulses through the interventricular septum. So you can see that's where they conduct them. And Purkinje fibers depolarize the contractile cells of both ventricles. Now, you don't know what depolarize means. We will discuss it in physiology, but right now just remember that they carry electrical impulses to ventricles. And that's conduction system. And we're gonna end this lecture with some homeostatic imbalance, congestive heart failure, or CHF, and it's a progressive condition where cardiac output is so low that blood circulation is inadequate to meet tissue needs. What it means, it's actually a disease of the heart when heart is not able to pump the appropriate amount of blood. Cardiac output is volume of blood pumped by your heart in 1 minute. So when your heart is unable to pump enough blood, then you don't bring enough blood to your tissue, and your tissue made your organs, they start dying. Right now, if you look over here, we actually have diastolic and systolic heart failure. Now, diastolic, when you cannot, diastolic means a relaxation of ventricles. And when we have relaxation of ventricles, we need to fill in these ventricles with blood. So heart can't fill. And this might be maybe because of stenotic heart. So you see like these walls became stenosis, and we reduce or small, the chambers became smaller, right? Or these muscles became maybe larger, and it's reduces the volume of the vesicle, of the ventricles. Or it can be systolic heart failure, when and systolic means contraction. This is when heart can't pump. And this happens when we have stretched and thin chambers, so we don't generate enough force. And again, as is diastolic, when we have stiff and thick chambers. So, but why, why we have a stiff and thick chambers or straight chambers? That can be another, conditions that affects your heart first, and as a result, we have heart failure. So heart failure can be caused by coronary atherosclerosis, persistent high blood pressure, multiple myocardial infarction, and dilated cardiomyopathy. And the coronary atherosclerosis, when we have when coronary blood vessels are damaged. Right, blood pressure, you know what it means. I think everybody understands. Myocardial infarction is heart attacks. A dilated cardiomyopathy is when the ventricles became large. And there is a different type of cardiomyopathy, and of course different different types caused by different conditions, right? I think that's it. I'm sorry, I think like the last part. Why we are not talking about this dilated cardiomyopathy, because it's a pretty big and complicated topic. Just for now, it's enough for us to know that blood vessels, oh, I'm sorry, ventricles can become large over here, and walls became thin, and that's preventing us from pumping adequate amount of blood into circulation. Okay, so I think this is the last slide. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.